Anything you're curious about?
You do your thing, and then if I have any questions, I'll
Okay.
chime in.
Well, so there are two hot topics at the moment in Highland that I'm aware of. There's probably others that I'm not aware of, but the current hot topics are the sale of city-owned open space to adjacent residents, and then the other hot topic is the Micron land that D.R. Horton bought, which is on our west border off of Highland Boulevard. It's north of Dry Creek Highlands, that subdivision, and a little bit and west. And so those are the two topics. Let me start with the D.R. Horton Micron project, okay? Where that is at the moment is D.R. Horton has gone before the Lehigh City Planning Commission, and it was a 3-3 vote there whether or not to recommend their project to the city council. And so a tie is a no. So it came with a negative recommendation to the council. The council reviewed it last night. It was, hi Joyce.
Hi.
We're talking about Micron, your favorite subject.
Yeah, I was at the Lehigh meeting last night till midnight.
Yes, I watched. Ours go sometimes past midnight, but that's a long night.
That's crazy.
It is. So it went to the, like I was telling Kathy, it went to the Lehigh City Council last night, the project did, and they voted to continue it to a future meeting. My guess is it will be their first meeting in July, which I think is the second week of July. We've scheduled a work session with D.R. Horton, or we're scheduling it now on July 6th. That'll be between 6 and 7. So you might want to make a note of that.
Is that a public?
Yes, it's a public meeting, but it's not a public comment meeting. It's just a work session that anybody can attend. But work sessions typically don't have public comment. We'll do our council meeting right after that, and then at the front end of the council meeting, there's the public comment period.
Did you say that was? Did you say that was 5 to 6, 6 to 7? I couldn't remember.
6 to 7.
6 to 7.
6 to
Thank
7.
you.
6 to 7 on 7/6.
On
Wait,
7/6.
I'm confused.
Yes, 6 to 7 on 7/6. So, and they'll just review where they are relative to their plan with our council. I talk with someone from D.R. Horton at least a couple times a week and have for the last few weeks. So there is a dialogue going on between, Highland and D.R. Horton, and some of our city council members have spoken with council members from Lehigh. And my experience with D.R. Horton has been pretty good, especially with Scott Bishop. He's willing to talk and listen, and he's transparent. He tells us what they're thinking. We tell him what we're thinking. And I'll just give you my lay of the land with respect to them. They are bending over back. They're bending over somewhat, or backwards, whatever analogy you want to use, to accommodate us in the same context of, they need to make money on the property that they bought and paid for. That's not our problem, that's theirs, but they're not going to come propose something that loses money for them. Like no business would want to do that. But they are being accommodating to requests. For example, one of the first things we told them was, we would really like for there to be a buffer zone of larger lots between Highland residents and other residents. And they accommodated that with their plan. We also mentioned that we've heard from our residents that they would like to have access to their trail system. And so actually there was a resident, I had a meeting with D.R. Horton, and during the meeting I got an email from a resident. I think it was last name Quinn.
They're our neighbor.
Do they live on the west border at the end of a cul-de-sac?
No, that's me. They live on Dry Creek Lane with their backyard to the north, which would be on 118th North.
Okay, so somebody on the cul-de-sac, the first
Lynn
cul-de-sac,
Oldham?
that could be, it's at the end of the cul-de-sac, there's a north and a south lot. It's the south lot that isn't landscaped as much
That would be me.
in the cul-de-sac.
I'm in the top of that cul-de-sac on the south side on Dry Creek Lane.
And it's not the very top, it's the next one down.
No, we're at the very top. Our backyard
Okay.
would be on that open space where the trail is going in.
Okay, but is your backyard on the road? The
No.
east and west road?
The north lot would be on the road where the roundabout was going in, but that's gone now. That roundabout.
What roundabout?
There was a roundabout that they had after at the end of our line of houses to access their neighborhood, but they've removed that in the proposed concept plan that they presented last night.
Okay, so are you the very northmost set of homes
Yes.
on Dry Creek? Okay,
Mhm.
one road down, there's a cul-de-sac.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about where the easement was being asked to be provided
Yes.
between property? Yes.
And
Those neighbors were a little not unsure about it.
Well, they were positive when I talked to them, or I exchanged emails with them. And when Scott spoke with them, the one on the south was very willing to accommodate that. But anyway, so they reached out. As soon as I said there's someone that might be interested in an access, they called them.
Mhm.
And so they've been very reactive to any requests we've made. So I'm
I
pleased with
believe,
that.
yeah, I believe that neighbor has since changed his since considering it a little more in depth.
Recanted. Okay.
They're
But anyway-
concerned about traffic and animals and animal waste in yards and things like that.
That's fair. But you know, if no one grants access, then it will be hard for them to
To
provide
support that
access.
trail. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's up to the residents, but they have been accommodating that way. So
They have.
So the thing is, we have an agreement with Lehigh on a boundary, and that's more of it's a gentleman's agreement, if you want to think of it that way. I mean, it's a document that we both signed, but it's not. I don't believe, and our attorneys are unsure whether or not that's enforceable, especially in the case of a landowner requesting to go into one city or another. So if land is undeveloped, what happens is there's usually boundary line agreements between cities. So there's a default city that it gets incorporated into. But the landowner can request to be annexed to any city that adjoins the property. And if there's then a dispute between the two cities, it goes to something called a boundary commission that the county has set up. And in that case, the boundary commission, what they look at typically is so they'll ask city A and city B, can you service the area? Can you provide sewer, water, or public safety? Yes. And the other city, if they ask the same question and it's yes, then they'll ask the landowner, which city do you want to be in, A or B? And if they say A, then they'll go to A. That's probably 99.9% of the time how it turns out. So we can dispute it. We can go to a boundary commission. We could even go to court if we wanted to. But at the end of the day, where it will land likely is wherever D.R. Horton wants it to land. Okay, so what leverage do we have? Well, the leverage we have is that we have good relationship with Lehigh. They don't necessarily, nobody's interested in going to war with your neighboring city. So we will work to be accommodating with each other. Now, I know there's one city council there that said last night, but I know what he
Not
said, but
popular.
yes, popular with his residents, right? And that's how we are as well. I just think personally that rather than have a lot of arguments out in public where you can't control, things can spin out of control if it's in public when you're negotiating with Lehigh and with D.R. Horton. At some point it needs to be, but my experience has been you get a lot more done when you do things in a nice way than in public and trying to make it into a war, because then it's just hard, because then people have to draw lines and say, I need to protect my residents like that council member did. But in private, you can get things worked out better. But I think my sense of where things are is I think we can come to a place where we're all happy, or relatively happy. No, we're not going to get everybody happy, but I think we can find a way for them to develop it in a way that works for them, works for Lehigh, and works for us. One thing we need to consider is that if you do the senior-oriented living 55 plus housing, there is negligible impact to our schools, right? You'll have in any 55 plus area, you're bound to have people under 55. Even federal guidelines and rules say that 20% can be under 55. So you'll get occasionally younger people there, but it's predominantly not, especially, the kids are generally grown, but you'll have some where there's an impact to the school, but it's not nearly the impact of single family housing. The traffic is about a third, and that's been documented. Mark Johnson, who's the mayor of Lehigh, his business that he runs is a design business for developers. And one of the companies that they do a lot of work with is called Leisure Villas. That's a 55 plus housing area. And so they do a lot of design work with them. And they've done studies and found that the traffic is about a third of regular housing.
That
And
totally makes sense.
And the water usage is less. The only thing that's more is public safety ambulances. Us older folks, unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm in that crowd. You guys probably aren't, but
oh yes, no, not at all, not even close.
So there is an increased public safety cost on that property. So I like the idea of having senior living in there. That's a win for both parties, right? That gets them density and that lowers the impact on us. We could take the stance on, and I think Lehigh would be supportive because we did sign an agreement with them in 2014. Now, by we, I mean our mayors, our respective mayors. And in our case, it was with the blessing of the council. In their case, I'm sure he talked with the council, but there wasn't a public record of it. But that's not enforceable either. But it's an agreement both cities are willing to adhere to. So we could say, okay, on that 109 acres on the north side, 2 units per acre, that's all you'll get. But then my personal opinion is then the mix will be wrong, because then you'll have all townhouses on the rest of the property, and there's not going to be any senior. And so I think a mix is better. I think we can work with the developer and like you've noticed, Joyce, that they have made improvements. Then the question becomes, where does it make sense? Does it make sense to take that whole northeast quadrant and say, let's make that all Highland? Or does it make sense to have that northeast quadrant be all in Lehigh? And there are pros and cons to that. On the pro side, if it's in Highland, then we're if there are, before they develop it, we know that if there are any amendments to the entitlement, they'll have to go through our city council, right? If it isn't in Highland, if it's in Lehigh, it could be amended before they start construction.
And that's
we
my
don't know,
concern.
and we don't know when that is. On the other hand, if it's in Highland, we'll pick up the cost of snow plowing, of maintaining the roads, of putting in the light. And we did a study a couple of years ago, and if you just look at property tax and fees that residents pays, not sales tax, the impact of a new home in Highland is negative $200 a year to the city. So, and that's because we have to take care of parks, right, out of general funds. We have public safety costs that go up. So cost-wise, it might be better for us if it's in Lehigh, but you have the risk, right? So there's just going to be trade-offs between the two. Unfortunately, there'll be just trade-offs.
Right.
And we'll need to look at that. But I think we can get to a good place because everybody's still talking with each other, and we're working towards it. And I think we're going to get to a good place. We just need to continue what we're doing. To me, everybody's been doing the right thing. You're asking questions, we're asking questions, we're meeting with the developer. One-on-one meetings are pretty effective. We'll have another public meeting. Well, the open house wasn't our meeting, it was their meeting, but we'll have a public meeting.
That's not a public record.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know that has a lot of value long-term, right? Public record, because councils, when it's a legislative decision, they can make a decision for any reason or no reason, right? You can vote. If it's administrative, you have to be one way or the other, but legislative can change. So we'll have that work session. The next thing that would come up on the horizon for us would be an annexation agreement. And that would either be us voting on a resolution saying we support the land being annexed into Lehigh under these conditions, or it would be an annexation agreement to have the property come to us, and then we would identify how that was going to be zoned. And those are TBD. I know D.R. Horton is open to either. Still, the door isn't shut on either one. If I was a betting person, I'd say it's probably 70-30. 70% chance it goes into Lehigh, 30% chance it goes into Highland. Going into Highland puts additional pressure on our pressurized irrigation. We already have water pressure issues. We'd have to beef up our system, which they would help pay for with impact fees, but those don't cover immediate costs. You have to catch up on those.
And I'm assuming that would be the Beacon Hill Upper.
Yes.
In that area.
Yes. So we would have to upgrade the pond there. My understanding is we'd have to upgrade the PI line. We'd have to cut Highland Boulevard at Sterling Point and go across, put in another line. So it would be a little bit disruptive from that end. Alternatively, you could put a pressurized irrigation pond at the top of what would be the Highland part. And then that could serve like the west side of Highland Boulevard. But D.R. Horton is going to have to, there's going to have to be a water tank and a pressurized irrigation pond that they're going to have to put up on high anyway for the rest of it. Mm-hmm. So there's an incremental reduction in cost, but it's not like they wouldn't have to build a water tank or a storage tank. So they'll get some benefit. We just don't we just don't know how much, right? So we'll have to look at those trade-offs. But what I would like to what I'm personally focusing on, the council has their own point of view. I'm just trying to get to a place where we're happy with the development that comes in, and then once we've done that and we know what it's going to be like, then we can talk about where it goes. And I think once you have that nailed down, it's easier to have that second discussion, because then you know the impacts of the project on the cities. Now, I think I know based on the meeting last night, it didn't appear like Lehigh was interested in having that land come to Highland, but I don't know that they've looked at what the cost is to them of having that, because the way it's going to develop first is that'll be an island. So when they need to do snow plowing, they'll have to come to a completely different area. When they need to do any public works activities, it's a little bit further and a little bit more distant. There won't be a direct connection for a while to the west, if at all ever. So, and I talked with Jason, their city manager, and we both kind of laughed that, residential isn't a moneymaker for any city, right? You get your money out of commercial and attendant, sales tax. So you don't make a lot of money by building new homes, because it does create costs. So we'll just see how it looks out. Right now, I'm looking at it half full. So I think it's moving in the right direction, and we're all still talking, and we're being very nice to each other. I've talked to Boyd Martin a couple of times, who's the local president of D.R. Horton. And, we all want to work together at this point. We haven't, which is good, because once people get defensive, then it's hard to have productive discussions.
Yes, I saw that firsthand at the open house.
Yes. But I think we're all still in a good place. So is there any specific question you have about it?
Well, last night I was very disappointed that we didn't get to talk about that west side, and or the east side, and I understand the west side and the whole Bermuda Triangle thing, which was giving me a headache after beating the dead horse. So I mean, a lot of our comments were based on not being able to really look at the revised version of the concept plan. And so after the meeting, I was able to get with Greg and Adam and look at it, because I had long discussions with both of them at the open house, as many of us did. And I was very surprised at how willing they were to take our suggestion and make those improvements. I'm comfortable personally. I can't speak for all of my neighbors, but I'm comfortable with the concept plan as it stands, the latest one that was presented last night. My concern is, though, that something happens on the west side, and then they're going to try to push the density back over on our side.
Yeah, well, D.R. Horton will want that finalized, but of course, until it's developed, it can change, right? Because they're changing their area plan from 10 years ago.
Right. So where are our protections? I mean, we make these agreements, good faith, whatever. Legally, how does Highland as a city and Highland as residents impacted by all of this? I mean, they could say, well, we're going to take out the trail and we're going to put high density houses behind you. And then what do we do to protect ourselves?
We try and be good neighbors and not turn it into a war, because if it turns into a war, they hold even today, they hold all the cards for the property that's in Lehigh. They can do with it what they want. So our only protection is the relationships that we have with the mayor, council, and each other. But we really have no legal protections.
Okay.
And
So I don't understand the process. Once like a developmental plan has been approved, they can still change things last minute.
correct. Until they've actually built it, it's subject to change. Because I'll give you an example. The townhomes that are behind Arctic Circle in Highland, they're
Okay.
kind of gray. They're behind Ace Hardware, to the west of Ace Hardware, to the east of the splash pad.
Yes, the ones that are being under construction right now.
Correct.
Yes, okay.
Okay, and there's some that are already built and occupied. That was presented to the council about 6 years ago when I was on city council. And that was torches and pitchforks. And literally there were almost fistfights in the foyer. People were really a little bit upset. And the plan that was approved at the time was a 3-story with a basement option. And it changed owners. And then they came back with amended plans. And then the council approved those amended plans before they started construction. But any plan change has to be approved by the council. But of course, once it's built, right? But until it's built, they can always ask for amendments. Now, what could we do? Well, we could, make sure that we have a gentleman's agreement that says, okay, this is the plan. We're allowing this to be annexed contingent on this plan. But once it's annexed, we kind of lose control. But even now, even though the 2014 isn't legally binding, both Lehigh staff and Lehigh city council and the mayor, they're willing to stand by that agreement and go with it. Just like we stood by the agreement and changed the boundary, the Lehigh Highland boundary, and put it in the middle of the lake that they're building now by Smith. The boundary, when it was recorded with the county, they put the boundary on the west end of the property line. And that was because it was convenient for the person that recorded it. But the intent was to have it be in the middle of the lake. And we agreed with them that, that was the intent of our agreement. And we supported a boundary change to that effect. We didn't have to, we could have contested it. But cities generally like to be nice to each other because you never know when you need the other person. A few years ago, we had flooding down in Bull River. And Lehigh came and they have bigger equipment than we do. So they came in with some of their bigger equipment and helped clear the channel there so it didn't flood. And that was just them being good neighbors. So that happens a lot. So being good neighbors and most cities realize that. And there's there's always some council member that's been around a while, or the mayor, that knows that there's value in that. So I think it would be relatively safe to have Lehigh annex it and move forward with that plan. It would be safer if it was our property, if it was in Highland jurisdiction, because then it would have to go through our council to be changed. And like I said, I think that's not totally impossible. And for the developer, maybe there is perhaps a little value in being in Highland because of property values.
Right. We've used that argument.
Yeah. I mean,
But Lehigh's not interested in losing those little triangles either.
no, well, yeah, I don't know how that one's going to turn out, but that's for their city council. Their residents are currently on the west side of the property, so all of their comments are going to be about that area. They're not going to be making, their residents wouldn't make any comments about either our area or even the north area that's in the Draper property that they want to annex.
I was referring to the small parcels that's already in Lehigh
Yes.
that would be bordering.
Boarding us?
Yeah.
They don't care about that. It doesn't matter.
No, but the council is not interested in letting that be annexed into Highland to make that whole area just Highland, because it's like a weird little appendage, a little, like you said, an island.
Yes. So, but it would have to, for the developer, that if that northeast quadrant it doesn't work if it's in two cities. It has to be one or the other. It just won't work. So I think we can make a case for having it be in Highland, but it will really depend on the property owner, which is D.R. Horton. So we're talking with them frequently. We're having good conversations. You know, they've reached out to Nathan, spoken with him. I know they've talked to every member of our city council. So then they all have each other's phone numbers. And I just got 2 calls today, one from Scott and one from Boyd, the president, about a couple things, and they're productive. So they're interested in working together. Sometimes being a jerk is the right thing, but most of the time I think you're long term you're better off maintaining good relations. So I'm pleased with how things are progressing so far, and I think your input was heard. Like you said, they did make changes, and so they may be making more changes. You know, we're doing our own analysis to see how much that's going to cost if it all goes into Highland. How it would impact us. We're doing that analysis right now, so staff is working on that. So there are a lot of things going on behind the scenes. But the next one will be that work session, and then after that, the next public meeting would likely be a discussion on the annexation, one way or the other. But I don't see that happening until after Lehigh says how they would entitle it. And then D.R. Horton has already filed annexation requests into Lehigh with Lehigh, but Lehigh hasn't acted on it and won't until it's settled with us. So we'll see what happens there. Anything else?
No, I really appreciate your time and explaining all that, and your support.
You're very welcome. We want things to be best for our residents. Sometimes it's complicated, right?
Yes.
Dan, have you followed that Micron issue at all?
This is actually the first I'd heard of it, so
Okay.
I didn't even get here for the first part of the discussion.
Yeah, well, D.R. Horton bought 850 acres surrounding Micron, and they're working with Lehigh to put a plan in place to do a mostly residential development there. It does affect the west end of Highland, and there is a piece there that is still in the county. There's the annexation, the boundary agreement between Lehigh and Highland call for that to go into Highland, but the owner can always request it go somewhere else. So that's where we're at right now, and our residents are rightly concerned about it. One benefit we'll get out of that being developed is there'll be a light at 1108 and Highland Boulevard, which is a good thing.
I have a couple more.
You have a couple more?
Yes, the wind will get cut down some, and the weeds in my yard coming from all those open fields will decrease significantly.
Yes. All right.
And
So
the vole population will be decimated.
yes.
You hope.
If my cat has any leftovers.
Yes. Okay, so it can be three quarters empty, right? Or 1/4 full, even if, or half full, or 3/4 full. All right, the other hot topic, if we're done with this, is the open space property sales.
Thank you, bye.
Bye, thanks, Joyce. The other item is the sale of open space property. And Kathy, there's some in your neck of the woods that are impacted by that. You live in Beacon Hills, right?
Yes.
So in that case, this is kind of a longstanding request from people. They look at open space, and if it's native and it's adjacent to their property, they would like to own it, right? Because native means the city really doesn't do a lot with it.
Right.
And sometimes that means you get weeds or garbage collects there because of the wind in Highland. It seems to
Right.
move garbage around a lot.
I actually walked Hog Hollow today and went up into the backyards, like the Gileses that were there
Yep.
at the city council.
Yes.
I actually went there and saw what he was talking about, because I walk that all the time. I jog it all the time,
Right.
but I never like go up to the people's backyards. I just stay on the trail. So I actually just walked up there, and yeah, I can totally see what he's, why he would want to purchase that. It's a huge property.
Yes.
Behind his house.
I'm sharing my screen. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so let me get this down to what we're talking about. So we're talking about this area right here.
Mhm.
And the Giles, I believe, is
They're the
this
fourth
property,
house.
right?
Or the
So
fourth
that's-
house. Mhm.
This is them.
That little white thing's in the way, but I think so, yes.
Yeah, let me put this over here.
I'm just on my phone, so everything's really tiny. I can't.
Okay, so this is the Giles home. Now, if you look
Mhm.
down, dang. Okay, if I look down, the next property is owned by someone else, and you can see that they've landscaped,
All the way down to the trees.
right? And that's not their property.
Right.
Okay, and so now they're watering that grass with water that they're not paying for, right? Because your PI bill is based on the amount of space you can irrigate on your property, as opposed to how much you use, because we don't have meters on it.
Right. Right.
They're watering quite a bit.
Well, and if you go up too, just keep going up the trail, you can see all those are developed. All
Right.
of those
Now,
are put in grass.
interestingly enough, this bottom one is also landscape, but they've done some hardscape as well. So they've adjusted, they put some structures and
A trampoline and everything.
and a trampoline, and then this cement curbing.
Mm-hmm. And none of that is theirs.
None of that is theirs. And
Right.
that changed the topology. And this area is a protected area by the Army Corps of Engineers as a drainage basin.
Okay.
So technically, we're not supposed to do anything without their permission to it. So this is my opinion, is just my opinion because I don't have a vote, but until we figure out as a council what we're going to do with the properties that have been encroached, I don't think we can sell that to him, to Giles. And he's been so nice about it. He's the only one that asked permission, right?
Right.
Everybody else just did. But so I just think the council, this is a bigger decision than this one property. And
Oh
then
yeah, every single house along there
yes,
has done some sort of, even
almost
to the point,
everyone.
almost Yes, almost everyone. I'd say 90%.
Yeah.
But even like one house had gone under the tree line and cleared all the brush out, all the fallen logs,
Right.
everything, so that they could put chairs under there and sit in the shade, you know?
Okay. I understand that. If I was a neighbor, I might want to do that, but anyway,
But then they just stacked all the fallen logs in a big pile.
right.
So it's
And
it's
then,
not even like attractive. It's just, they didn't even get rid of it. It's just sitting there in a big pile.
and then the other thing they do, or some people do that encroach like that, is they start kicking people off their property, right? That's not their property, right?
Yeah, I
'Cause
did. And I did feel like, oh, are they going to think I'm on their property peering at their stuff, you know, because I'm just kind of looking around, and
Yeah,
I didn't go way up or anything. I stayed back, but I did feel that way. I felt like, well, this is city property and I should be able to go on it, but it feels like their property.
yeah. So this is a thorny issue, right?
Yes,
this is
it's going to
one
be
of
very sensitive.
it
I don't
is.
think I don't think you're ever going to get a, you know, happy. It's never going to be perfect.
It's not going to be a happy solution. And my
No.
concern about letting people encroach is, okay, when do you stop? Right.
Mhm.
When-
So at
when
some
squatters'
point,
rights take over.
well, they don't actually. We talked to our attorney. They don't.
What did you say? What did he say?
There's rights.
Squatters, you know,
Oh, squatters. No, the squatters take over. I see.
So it's my concern is if you give just a little, okay, that makes sense, right? Then somebody else will say, and then pretty soon this open area that we have won't be open anymore. And so they're, you know, I can see things from both sides, but
I have a neighbor. So I talked to my neighbor about this. He's actually a realtor. So he, you know, he deals with all of these kinds of things, you know, showing people homes and saying this isn't their property, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
I can tell you what his thoughts were if you'd like.
Sure.
So he has actually put in some, we have a pipe that runs down our back of ours on Lighthouse. So I have a fence at my property line, so I
Right.
have not developed past that. But
Right.
my neighbor doesn't have a fence. So there's a few, maybe 15 feet or something. It's not a
Right.
lot. It's not
Right.
like these homes that have, it's almost an entire lot size
Yes.
in some of
I
them.
mean, it's sizable.
Yes, it's very, very sizable on some of them. But anyway, he just has a little bit of grass, which isn't not a big deal. But he said, well, we've already got this big mess, you know, with people who have already developed, and then those people who haven't developed maybe want to purchase. He just says, well, if they've already developed, leave it, and then they will have the consequences if the city wants to do something with it or whatever. Those that want to purchase, let them purchase, and then they can do what they want with it. And those that don't want to develop, then they just don't have to. You know what I mean? They could just keep their thing, you know. So he's like pretty much let everybody do what they want to do. So I don't know if
That is a perspective. My concern there is one of the things people value in Highland is the open spaces, right?
right. And if they keep encroaching on, well, there's got to be some sort of
Right.
stopping point.
Right. So when do you stop?
Yeah. And then what do you do when people have already, like, okay, say that corner house, it's already got the curbing put in, and I'm sure they've torn out a bunch of the native growth.
Yes.
What do you, and then do you go to them and say, you have to rip this all out or fine them? I mean, you know, that just,
it is
that's just gonna
probably a
not-
finable offense. I mean,
huh?
they have taken public property or
Mhm.
they've improved it. I know what I would do, sort of, but it's not my decision. So,
Well, what's your opinion?
okay, my opinion is you just tell them, we appreciate you make it into a park. Thank you for contributing. And
Any place where someone has developed, because like one of this
Yes.
areas, that's what I kind of thought. I'm like, we should make this a public park and the neighborhood kids can come and play here because there's
Yes.
so much grass.
yes. We could do that. I'm just really reticent to give up that much land because
But then,
it sets precedence, right? So if you say, okay, here's the dilemma. You say, okay, you encroached, we'll sell it to you, right? Maybe you sell it to them at twice the price that we're selling it normally. But now you've sent a signal that, okay, encroach, it's all right. You'll get the property eventually. So what message are you sending?
yeah,
Yeah, that's not a good precedence because
It'd be like you or your neighbors encroaching on the golf course. Oh, they don't use that land. I'm gonna take out that fence. Nobody hits balls here. The golf course wouldn't, that wouldn't work. So
well, and if they didn't plant grass and keep it maintained and weeded and all of that, would the trees maybe move out from the edge, and be more of a,
I don't know.
would it, are they preventing natural habitat from its
Growing?
natural growth,
Yeah,
Well, they are,
Definitely.
but to what extent,
yeah.
a lot of it is kind of a meadowy, weedy area. There are little meadows in there that are no trees
Yes.
within just the narrow, the trail area.
Oh, switching screen. Am I on a different screen for you now?
we still see the
You still
county
see
map.
that one? Okay.
Right.
I was trying to look, okay. Well, if you want to look at thorny problems, I'll show you another one.
All right.
This one here. Okay. That's his property.
Uh-oh.
Is that the Beauchesne's house? Is that up in my Beacon Hill area?
That's Hirsch's.
Okay. Who?
Hirsch's?
The Hirsches. I don't know them.
Okay. Let's see, this is Highland. That's Highland. And anyway, that's a interesting challenge.
So what is the yellow area?
The yellow area is Highland.
Okay.
And now if we click on this, that's the property owners.
Okay.
He's built a pool on there.
And
He's got terraces and
yes,
pad.
and boats.
What is the city policy? I mean, like, is it written down somewhere what you're allowed to do or not allowed to do?
You're not, it's city property. You shouldn't do anything to it.
Does it have a fine if you do, or does it have any kind of
There could
negative
be.
consequences?
We have gotten to the point where we had a letter written that we were going to distribute to people that encroached. And then we've gotten really close a couple times, and then council kind of backs off and says,
It's because it's very sensitive. You don't want to make.
because it's
I mean,
sensitive.
there's
So
so many. So many people
I
affected.
volunteered to go along with the city engineer and deliver them.
Doesn't the city attorney have anything to tell you on that? Because I mean, it seems to me like if it's continued to be ignored, then that itself is abdicating.
And it just creates, one person does it, then the neighbor does it because, oh, it's okay, he did it.
Well, their
It
next
just-
door neighbor's done it too now. Next to the Hirsches there, they've done it too.
Yes. it's an issue. This property here is property that we own that because there was a trail at one point in time planned to go through here. I think this is the area. Yeah.
That's Alpine.
Oh, that's Alpine. Anyway, some of the land, we had like a 20-foot strip that we owned because we were going to put a trail there. And in some cases we haven't. And so then we've sold those off. Not all of them, but some of them. But let's say you're this property owner here and you want to buy it, but your neighbors don't. Well, we couldn't sell it to you because we would lose access to city property. So it's sort of an all or nothing thing on that. But what we did this last time around on the property is we asked staff to go through and identify, okay, what pieces of land do we own that we think we don't need, and there's a benefit to us selling it. And they gave us a list, and then the staff went through, then council went through it, and we came up with, okay, these are the ones that we'll go with right now. And then we put out of a courtesy or a kind of a CY, call it CYA, whatever you want to call it. We said, all right, we're going to let residents know that we are selling off property. Here's the criteria that we used. It's not exclusive, but this is what we used. If you have any other suggestions for what you might want, let us know, and then we'll evaluate that as well. And so where we're at on that is in next week at our council meeting, we're going to go through and pick the ones that we'll sell this go around. We'll do this annually, but I think what we'll do this, my guess is that what the council will do this time is go with the list that the city gave, the staff gave us, is here's properties that make sense. And then we refined that a little bit. Some of what they said makes sense, but there's no buyers. It would be nice if we didn't own this, but nobody's interested in buying it. So,
well, because if you can develop it without buying it, why would you buy
no,
it?
well, there's others that just people have already put fences and it's only 3 feet or 4 feet. There's no market, right? It doesn't do anything for the property owner, really.
Oh, I see. Okay.
There's other, let's go to Viewpoint. I'll give you an example. So Viewpoint is one of the,
That one's tricky in Viewpoint. I looked at that.
yes. So that's one that's been an issue. This is Viewpoint up here. And there's this property here that the city owns. If you've ever seen that, this is a pretty good slope right here but on the flat spot on top, nobody gets to it because it's just not accessible. And so, yeah, it would make sense to sell this off. It's an all or nothing thing. But it does make sense to sell it off. There was at one point in time, the developer was supposed to put a trail that went all the way behind those homes and then out to the road. And if you look at the homes on the south side of the road don't have a sidewalk on them. And it was because there was going to be a trail behind them, but the trail never got built. And it's pretty steep over here. So it's never going to get built. So this makes sense to sell off. And the property owners are interested in doing that. There's another piece over here that's kind of similar, where you've got the gravel pit over down here, and then this corner of property. And they would like to buy it. But I don't think we're gonna be selling that because there's a possibility that, let me just broaden out a little bit here, that there'll be a road built that goes behind those homes, and we might need a corner of that property for the road. So we don't know if we're gonna need that property or not in the future, so we're just holding off. We're likely to hold off on that. The green field here to the north of Viewpoint is in Alpine. It's owned, and at some point it will be developed. So absent putting a road on the outside of Viewpoint, all the traffic from Alpine is going to come down through Viewpoint through this residential. And you can see the road's been stubbed. And a road will go there. But if we have a better road that goes outside the neighborhood, more people would take that because it's an easier, more straight shot connection.
Can you say Manor Drive?
No, we don't want to talk about Manor Drive tonight. We can. If you want to, we can. But
no, I'm just referring to my son lives over on Manor Drive in an apartment.
Oh, a basement apartment?
Yeah, and he's always telling me the latest drama.
Yes.
Nothing's Polaroids the neighbors more than that.
No, and it's the two at the end versus everybody else,
Yep.
Unfortunately.
It's
And
a real problem.
That is, I just couldn't recommend in good conscience putting a road to within feet of a home.
No.
And so, and it's scary to me that garbage pickup is they back down that road
with kids. I mean,
with
there's kids all over there. So
yeah, no, talk about safety hazard.
But see, I guess that my point is that if we don't take care of some of these issues, we're going to have these kinds of issues.
Yes. So Manor Drive, the council resolved, I think, in the right way. We're going to connect to the property to the north.
Mm-hmm.
This one, they will do a connection here because to me, this is a real Viewpoint has one exit if there's a fire.
Yeah.
Right. And so there needs to be another exit. It's just if we can put a better road outside, I think that will help. And there is space here for that, but I think we might need some of this here. So that's not, those neighbors may not be happy, but that doesn't, we have to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, there's going to be happy and unhappy people at the end of this year for that property stuff. And I don't know how the council's going to vote. Sometimes, especially during election season, people make decisions because of voting, not because of it's the right thing or wrong thing to do, right? Sometimes doing the right thing is hard.
Yep.
It is that way. And it's hard to sit there with a room full of people and make them unhappy, right? Or not make them unhappy. That's their choice, but tell them what they don't want to hear. That's not always easy.
Yep.
So
that's why all of us get into politics.
Yes.
We like making people upset.
Yes. So somebody is looking at YouTube Live. They're called NI Craftero, and they said hello. So I'm saying hello back. If you want to ask a question, go ahead and type something in. We're broadcasting this on YouTube as well. So the question I have to ask on open space sales is who benefits, right? And if it's just the property owner and not the city, then why are we selling the property? Mm-hmm. Right? There has to be some benefit to the city, or we shouldn't do it. So here, there's a benefit to the city because we occasionally come and have to cut this down. We would lose that responsibility. And we're not impacting anybody else but these neighbors. So I'm okay because this isn't really a generally publicly accessible area. Unlike the one that you were in, Kathy, where it is generally publicly accessible. That's a little bit more tricky.
What about watering? If they put in
watering,
grass, yeah, are we gonna, if they
they'll-
put in all grass, well then,
If they put in all grass, they will, their bill will go up because it'll be their property and we will. bill
oh,
them for
yes,
it.
true, that's true. Okay, yeah.
So once they own it, then we bill them for the property to water it, or whether it's grass or landscaping. And we did, when subdivisions are developed, the water does exist. The challenge is, like, we're in a drought right now. We're not going to have enough water even for our own needs, unless we cut back about 50%. We're going to have to steal from our reserves before the end of the year. And the reserves are up in Deer Creek and Jordanelle. And so that water, it's there and we can use it, but if we use it now, it won't be there next year. We call those stored water shares. Now, if they were spilling over the top of the dams, it would be one thing. We should use it, right? Because then it's gone. But where they're not spilling,
Yeah, but at the same time, if it was spilling over, we wouldn't have this problem down here either. So
that's correct. So
sometimes you have to use your savings, but
Yes.
yeah, it's hard to know when to do it.
right, because you don't know, is next year going to be worse. So we just try and not. But we did measure a couple years ago, and we're using 6 acre-feet per acre, and we should be using 3. Our system is designed at 3, and that's where the state wants us to be.
Mm.
But I can't blame anybody for overwatering because we don't have meters, so you don't know how much you're really using.
Yeah, we don't.
Right? You have I don't have a concept of how much I'm using, other than I turn my sprinklers down, right? But so I'm using less than I was before, but I didn't know how much I was using before.
Is the city also backing off on their public spaces, like along the highway, Alpine Highway?
I believe we are.
Okay.
It's just we have over 200 controllers that
Takes a while.
we have to go through and adjust. And we do get complaints occasionally from people that said, "Hey, it rained. Why are you watering?" And we say, "Well, yeah, but they're manual controllers."
Yeah.
And we have a lot of them. And so it's not practical. Now we have looked at getting smart controllers and moving to those.
Not cheap.
But that's not cheap.
I know. I'm working on a project for that right now with large buildings around the world, and it's not cheap.
It isn't cheap, especially for the kind that we would need, right? Because we'd need more zones than
And
your
you
normal.
need cellular data, and
Yep.
because you just don't have internet connections hanging out there.
Unfortunately, no. So anyway, it's more expensive than people think. I think when we looked at it, it was over $1 million.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
To do that. So that's something you can do incrementally, right? But it's hard to do that all at once.
Yeah.
Now, maybe we could use some of this American Rescue Plan money for something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can use it for water or sewer or broadband. But the amount we're getting is not going to cover very much in terms of broadband. So that's a long-term thing that we're working on. As we improve roads, we put in conduit, empty conduit,
Good.
so that it becomes less expensive over time. Because one of the expenses is if you have to cut into roads to put in conduit.
Yep.
So
True,
we're trying to make it possible going forward to make it less cost prohibitive. But that takes time. We can only do that as we do roads. So who knows? Any other questions, anyone? Kathy, about anything?
Nope, I have some things I wanted to talk to you about, but I'll see you on Friday.
Yes, I look forward to that. By the way, Dan, Kathy is a candidate for city council.
Oh, good.
Hi,
I
Dan.
saw the list go out. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Or condolences, whichever is.
Well, that was actually the question I had. I see we only have one candidate for mayor. I'm curious, what is it about mayor that scares people off?
I don't know. Actually, well, I think it's best if you're on city council before you you go mayor. It's possible to not, but I think it's much better if you do. And so there are some people that have been on city council or are on city council, but I'm guessing that they looked at Kurt and said, I don't want to compete against Kurt. I think he'll do a good job.
That's sort of what I heard.
And yeah, that's a consideration. I would be curious, I mean, I know we have, I guess, if I understand correctly, it's a weak mayor position in that you only get to vote in tiebreakers.
Correct.
So what else is there for mayor that makes it an interesting job?
Well,
managing staff?
Really, technically, I only manage the city manager.
Okay.
So then he manages the rest of the staff. So if I have gripes, I take them to him. Now, in reality, I since I'm in the office a lot, I just go talk to people if I need things and ask questions. And Nathan doesn't mind because I don't abuse that. But the part that's the hardest part of being mayor is people complaining about things you have no control over, right? And so, but you are the face of the city when it comes to residents. So if they have a complaint, they're more likely to come to you.
Right.
But I like being mayor better than being on city council. It's more work because you end up having meetings to go to. There's more committees that you end up sitting on. And then like with this Lehigh Micron thing, I've had over a dozen conversations on that topic with the developer and with Lehigh mayor. I probably call Mark once a week on something or one thing or another. I talk to Brad Frost, our neighboring mayor, a couple times a month. We have a monthly North Utah County Mayor's Breakfast. I go to a monthly meeting with all the mayors. I'm on our public safety board that meets monthly. I'm on a American Fork Canyon working group with the forest ranger that's over the area here. Some of the other mayors, UDOT is in that meeting, and the national parks person that runs the Timpanogos Cave goes to that. That's this Friday morning, as an example. So there's a lot of meetings to go to, and then there's an infinite amount of research you could do. So like on this property that we're selling, one of the things that I worked on was, let me do a share screen. Let me make this big again. How do I unshare the screen on this?
If you just click on the green.
Wait, stop share, where it says
Yep.
stop share.
Yep.
And then I'm going to do new share, and I'm going to share this. So I went through and I created a spreadsheet that has a bunch of information on it. This is one of the sheets in it. This is the pricing data. And what I did was we went and said, okay, here's property that we're interested in getting rid of. And so I went, and in every area where there was property that we were interested in getting rid of, I found 3 residential properties that adjoined it.
Mm-hmm.
So like there's a street called Avery, and I've got a link here to Utah County parcel map. Now, do you see this map?
Yes. It's coming up. Yep.
Okay. So this is Avery. And this little piece of property right here, oops, is a parcel that we could sell to this landowner if we wanted to. Then there's also land here that was supposed to be for a trail, but we have the Murdoch Canal Trail right there.
Right.
So we decided all this land was for sale. So what we did was we said, okay, let me find 3 properties around this area adjacent to it. And what is, how much acreage is it? How many square feet? What's the value of that land from the Utah County parcel map? Because they will show you the land value and then the improvements value. So that's like your home and then the property.
Right.
And then I said, okay, dollars per acre, dollars per square foot. And then I believe the church uses this as well as other commercial real estate people. When you're buying or selling orphan parcels, you take and use 25 to 30% of the adjacent property value as the benchmark for your price.
Mm-hmm.
And a realtor walked through us with that. And so we said, all right, we'll take the lower 25% and we'll use the county property value, which typically is not your highest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll say 25% of that is fair market value. And then we'll do a basket of properties. So we took the different areas that we're in, and I found 3 properties in each of them, figured out the dollars per square foot and said, okay, this is the average. And so for this year, that's what we will sell the property at. We'll sell public property at that price this year. And then at the end of next year, we'll go back and look at these same properties, see if the price was adjusted by the county, and then update the price. And so then it becomes somewhat objective.
Right.
And
mathematical, at least.
yes, and it's defensible. And yeah, some people are going to say it's too much. Nobody's going to say it's too low. But it's one that we can stick with because we found before when we sold property, it was very, very contentious.
Right.
We sold some trail up in Beacon Hills where there were 2 trails next to each other. So we sold land because they were redundant. And we had like 5 surveys done, and they ranged in price between $1 a square foot to $6 a square foot.
Mm.
And it depends how you valued it. Like you can use a value add mode where, okay, they're buying this land. Now what value is it adding to their property?
Mm-hmm.
And that tends to get a higher number than if you use comparable sales. But finding comps on orphan parcels is really hard.
Right.
And so that's why this 25% is what we went with, because finding comps is a lot of work. And we went with a range because what we found was if you're on a small lot, like in Viewpoint, the lots are a little bit smaller. You can see that the price per square foot up there is like high fours, $5 a square foot. And then the other parts of Highland where the lots are bigger, the value per square foot is dramatically lower. And rather than haggle over every parcel, we just said, okay, we're going to create a basket and then do an average. And that's what we're going to go with. Because the
So
people in Viewpoint would be very mad, like, well, these guys bought land and it was way less. Why are you charging us more?
Because you chose to live there.
Because, right? Because we can,
Yeah.
because it's more valuable there. But that's a tough conversation to have.
Yeah.
So anyway, I take the time to do stuff like this, and then I've looked at like open space. You know, I respond to all the survey questions in the annual survey. That takes time.
Mm-hmm.
I do my own charts and graphs on that. I meet with residents pretty much when they ask, or we work something out. But that's because I have the time, right? If I had a full-time job, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So if you're going to run for mayor, you need to have flexible time. That's the other thing, because there's a lot of things you get invited to and should do. So Kurt has his own business, and his time is flexible.
Mine wouldn't go over so well.
But somebody that, you know, has a 50, 60 hour work week job.
Yeah.
You know, it's not something that you can do on weekends. You can't mayor on weekends.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can, but there's a lot to do during the week as well.
I was gonna say, you will on
Yes.
weekends, because lots of things happen on weekends.
Yes, they do. Floods, fires,
New roads.
New
opening
roads.
Parties.
Yes, that was a good one. That was actually of the things I've been involved with as mayor, that's the thing that is one of the ones that I am happiest with myself, because there was
Yet they didn't call it the Man Meander.
no. My kids came up with very creative names for what it could be, but it's not. But you know, that stuff is all behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's and that's one of the things where I think being nice helped, because we actually, a lot of things had to go our way on that. We had to have legislation passed. We had to work with UDOT. We had to work with MAG. I had to go get $6 million from MAG.
Mm-hmm.
And that ended up being a really easy vote. But it was set up. Our city engineer did a really good job on the tech committee, and MAG staff was very helpful.
Right, but if it's an easy vote, that means there's a ton of work that went into it, because nothing gets by easy.
Yes, well, there's truth in that. So, but that's the stuff that you do that I actually enjoy, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's and it just takes time. But for me, I've learned a ton as being mayor. So this has been a really good experience for me personally, because I'm a better person for having served.
Mm-hmm.
I'm well, I won't say less judgmental, but you see multiple perspectives better, because you have to.
You pause more before you pass judgment.
Yes, there you go.
Well, I think you've done a great job, and I appreciate all the communication. And that is one thing I've really thought of as the best. I've never been in a place where I've had the mayor communicate as well. And that itself pulls me into, I mean, it's the only reason I would be here tonight, you know, and the other meetings that I've come to is because it feels like I'm listened to, and you know, I have a way of keeping up on what's going on. So the minutes, the notes, everything that the city does to make sure we know what's going on. It is greatly appreciated because it's not something I've had in other cities.
Well, and I think it's something we do really well, and the staff has upped their game in the last few years, right? You get those texts before meetings, you get text after meetings. I don't know if you've noticed, but you can go and look at voting history since 2018.
Oh, really?
Yes, so let me find that for you. City council voting history. It's when you get the council, the post council meeting link, if you click on it at the bottom, there'll be a link to this that has the voting history from every meeting going back. And so who voted how, you can go to the bottom, and they're in 2-year increments because you have the councils change after 2 years, right?
Right.
But if I can go to the bottom and I can say, sometimes I like to put the summaries on the top, but this Timball, 229 yes votes, 10 no votes, 1 abstention, absent from 2 votes, and then continue votes. So votes where you continued an item. So Kurt has voted 100%. Everybody's pretty high. You can see that, let's go to summary here. You can look and say, well, we're unanimous 85% of the time since 2018. And this last year and a half, we've been unanimous 90% of the time. So really, there aren't that many votes where it's split, right? Because a lot of them votes are kind of pro forma, right? It's an agenda item, you have to do it. It's obvious what the right answer is. And then there's a few where people have different points of view, and that's okay, right? I think if we all had the same point of view, we wouldn't have a good discussion, and we often get to a better place because there's discussion and disagreement. You just have to do it civilly.
Yep, agreed.
But that's available now. I don't know of another city where you can go and you can go through minutes and try and dig this up, but we keep it
right there. That's nice.
So like if you get in, Kathy, you can look at your votes and see, okay, have I changed it all over the last couple of years? And if you haven't, that's probably not a good thing, right? Because you learn as you go. There are a couple votes I might do different, knowing what I know now. But thankfully, some of the times where I voted in minority, I should have been in the minority, even though I didn't think so at the time.
Good to know.
But if you want to, this is a quick way to also look, what does the council do every, what do you do? These are a summary of all the issues we voted on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing you can use this for is, well, what does the council do? What do you vote on? And anyway, yeah, the city is doing much better at communicating than I think almost any other city in the neighborhood. So I think that's a good thing. Anything else, Kathy or Dan?
Nope. It's been really a pleasure to listen to you and your wisdom and, learn about the things that are happening here in Highland and the concerns that the residents have. So it's been informative.
All right. Thank you. Then I will sign off. I'll ask one more time if there's questions on YouTube. I'm not seeing any. So I will, and I guess I'm the only one watching, so there shouldn't be any questions.
If you start asking questions to yourself, Rod, in public,
Yes,
then
that's, and then I should go home and go to bed.
that's right.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you so
everyone.
much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for doing
so
this.
much.
Bye.